And we're off. All right. So you want to start with me? You want to start with how I got to Vermont?
I do want to start with how you got to Vermont as the burning question of the hour.
Um, so I finished up my master's of social work program in May.
Mm-hmm.
I finished my program in Jamaica
Yeah.
because it was remote, and I was like, "Yo, I got to get out of here." For my own mental health, in order for me to finish that program and maintain my sanity, I needed to leave. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and like when I was there, not only was like I'm working a lot, but I also had time to like have some real reflection on like what the next phase of my life looked like and like what is it that
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for. And I don't necessarily think that's something that you're given a ton of time to do in grad school. Like
Mm-hmm.
maybe it is part of the process, but maybe that's kind of like um specific to like what you're doing in like an internship or something like that or
Mm-hmm.
placement. But I was going into more deeper questions about like what I wanted out of life. And
Yeah.
um so I knew I wanted to work in higher ed. I knew I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to work in the college system. I really
Mm-hmm.
enjoyed supporting people at that point in their like developmental journey because it's
Mm-hmm.
really a unique time. I mean, every time is unique, but it's like we're just starting to like we're for the most part we're breaking away um from what we've been taught. We're starting to explore different obviously a different place, but different people, and we're like challenging some of
Mm-hmm.
our ideas and our beliefs, our value systems. And yeah, I was just like, I'd been doing some work with the community at the community college level as well as
Mm-hmm.
at the 4 year level. And I've been doing some work looking at the intersection of social justice and athletics
Mm-hmm.
because I think that like throughout history, specifically in this country, um,
Mm-hmm.
played such a huge part in social change,
Yeah.
right? And
Totally.
so I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, like I enjoy doing this, and specifically like I would say the intersection of like mental health, social
Mm-hmm.
athletics. And so I'd been doing some work, and I'm like, all right, like maybe this is the route I want to go. Like, okay, I've been working with student athletes. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
all right. And let me fast forward here because this is about you, not me.
No, this is great. I love it. I'm listening.
Um, yeah, like I just kind of went through that process of like, all right, now I need to start applying to jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew I was only applying to maybe 2 jobs in California. I pretty much knew I wanted to take a break from California. Like I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to try something new, like an adventure essentially. And I'd pretty much written off the Northeast. Like I'd never lived
Mm-hmm.
in the Northeast. I've never been called to the Northeast. Like I've visited New York, but other than that, I've never been north of New York.
Mm-hmm.
So like I'm applying. I'm applying to like places in Louisiana and Georgia.
Yeah.
I lived in Georgia for a little bit. I wasn't really feeling it, but I don't know. I was kind of going through the motions of like,
Mm-hmm.
fuck it.
Mm-hmm.
And so then this job comes up. It's a post grad fellowship uh,
Yeah.
in counseling. at this school that I'm familiar with from Middlebury College that
Mhm.
I'd heard of, didn't know much about it. Started asking around, and it's I don't know, it kind of has a Ivy League culture in terms of legacy. Like a lot of people,
Yeah.
grandparents, like went there, and then their parents, and so forth and so on. So it's definitely attributed to, like, I would say, top 1%. Like, and I was like, oh, I don't know if that's the demographic I really want to work with.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not sure if that's kind of where I want to go.
Mhm.
And applied and was like, I'll just apply. I'll see. We'll see what's what. And I talked to the director of my social work program,
Mhm.
and we had one of our, usual weekly kind of dialogues. And
Mhm.
I asked him, I was like, what do you think about this? And he's like, eh, he's he's like he's just the total, like, philosophical
Mhm.
older white guy who I love to death. Just like, well, where do you think it could take you? And I'm like, come
Mhm.
on, man, like, that's not what I'm asking you about.
No, I want you to give me the advice. Yes,
I was like,
true.
what do you think? He's like, well, what I think is, what do you think? I'm like, oh
Mhm.
God, man, you're killing me right now. Come on. Shout out to Dr. Shapiro. But yeah, he some things just kind of became clear that, um, in some of my own reflections about my own childhood experiences, um, that I was in predominantly private institutions, um,
Mhm.
until college. And I remember, like, it all just came kind of flooding in about my experiences
Mhm.
at a private school, and what that was like for me.
Mhm.
And then I was like, huh, what's that like for someone like me? Could that be the population that I'm looking for?
Yeah.
Could I support that population on the campus? I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
okay, something's there.
Mhm.
And then it's a Division 3 school,
Mhm.
Division 3 athletics program,
Yeah.
which means there can be some room for implementation,
Mhm.
implementation and exploration of, um, different approaches to supporting student athletes' mental health.
Mhm.
So once that kind of rang in, I was like, oh shit. Okay, uh, maybe I should take this. Maybe I might take this seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I applied, I got a response back in like a week, and they wanted to set up interviews. And I mean, I, I'm fast forwarding for the sake of time, but I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go to Vermont. I'm ready. I'm like,
Wow.
I'm down. Okay, all right. From what I'm hearing, and from what I'm hearing about their approach to new models of care
Mhm.
and the ability to change these, um, historical, psychotherapy models, or
Mhm.
frameworks, like, or how these frameworks are implemented. Yeah, like, this was real on, like, I've never
Mhm.
had an interview that was that honest before.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, so that gave me a good feeling. And then they found me housing. I I don't know. Either way, like I said before, I still wake up. I've just been here a month, but
Yeah.
I like, I tend to have like a gratitude practice in the morning.
Mhm.
Not to say I do it every morning. Sometimes it just, didn't happen. But I
Yeah.
and um I cannot. Yeah, I would turn the camera around all this, but like, I mean, I'm looking mountains, and I told you I look
Oh, I'm sure it's gorgeous. Vermont is beautiful.
cool, and exactly what I was looking for, exactly,
Yeah.
for like a break from everything. But nonetheless, what's going on with you? forget forget my old green mountain ass up here in Vermont. Where are you? You've gone through some changes.
Oh, I love that. I have gone through some change recently. I was in Fontana, California, which is like 60 miles east of LA, and now I'm back in LA. I moved to Los Angeles proper, K-Town. How long has it been? Maybe 3 weeks. I've only been here for a few weeks, and I moved to be closer to some friend. I was with family, and then I was by myself, and now I'm living alone in LA, which is great. I feel like I really needed the change, and I wanted to experience living in my own apartment with my dog. He's in the back, but it's blurry, you can't see. And it's interesting for sure. I'm having a good time though. It's nice. I feel like my body really needed to escape sort of what was happening, not that you could really escape, but I need a change of pace, I would say, from things that happened in this last year, and a lot of life changes sort of happened all at once, and now I'm here trying to make the most out of everything, which is good.
Life change that maybe is a little bit more significant than another. What was that for you?
What? One more time?
I was saying that you had a life change. You had a few life changes.
Yeah. I would say, yeah, and without getting too into it, I mean, I, changed my full-time job. So I do Asian Mental Health Project, not on the side, but I do it alongside my full-time work. So I, got a new job, relatively, I mean, it's been 6 months now, but, that was a big transition to a completely different space, lots of things to learn, some relationship changes as well, and then family changes. My family's up in Michigan, so they come back and forth. So, lots of like moving pieces in my personal life, and with my mental health project as well. We're, currently filing for nonprofit status, which is really, really exciting. Lots of paperwork, so that's changing pretty quickly too. I hired a lawyer. It's great. I felt like a real adult there. Working on these things. So, a lot of things are flourishing, and I really wanted to sort of get like a blank canvas for it all by like changing my location and being closer to people that I know, just because it was a little isolating. Fontana's not that far, but it was a little bit of a trek to find people that I knew. So yeah, I'm living life, enjoying it too. It's been good.
So you're doing phenomenal work. Like
Thank you. Yeah.
you're doing phenomenal work. And I remember doing a podcast with Chris Smith, who was a guest on your,
Yeah.
is it a webinar or like web series?
Yeah. He was one of the facilitators of our weekly wellness check-ins. I love Chris. Chris is awesome. Yeah.
And yeah, I remember him talking about you. And I was like, oh yeah, let me go look up. I was like, let me go look this up because this is really important. This is really important work. And I connected, one of the things that happened, I can remember, I think it was maybe like the third class of my master's program. I think we had total 30 students in my cohort. And I don't want to get the number wrong, but I think there were four Asian folks. All of them were women. I'm just painting. This is how I tell a story. It really doesn't have anything to do with them.
No, I'm curious.
Yeah, this is kind of how like I walk through the story or whatever.
It's good. It feels like I'm walking through a journey with you. It's good.
Yeah. So I remember, and it was like everyone's kind of still introducing themselves and what talking about what brought them to the work, what brought them to the program. And I remember a classmate of mine just being very vocal. She said, there is a lack of information and there is a lack of support for people in my community. And she was, she's Chinese. And that was the first exposure I'd had to a conversation like that. First exposure to, not my first exposure to someone Asian. My first exposure to somebody who's Asian, who's being very vocal about mental health. Like no, like I recognize there's a need in my community, and that's what brought me here. And the purpose of me getting this degree is so I can move forward and
Yeah.
help more people. I was like, oh damn, okay, yeah, yeah. I tried to get her on the podcast. She was like, I can't. Yeah, she was like, I'm not ready for that. Like I, yeah. I'm just not. I'm not ready for that. I was like, okay, okay. And come to find out, it's funny. Like, I talked to her later. She's like, honestly, I thought you were hitting on me, and now,
Oh my God, that's so funny.
oh no, I was damn. But I was like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how many people. I don't know how many people are like, hey, do you want to like be on my podcast? And like,
That's a tactic. I've seen it around.
like, I'm like, all right. I mean, it's not a terrible tactic. There's far worse tactics. There are
Yeah.
far
The
worse.
worst is professional photographers. Not no no no. I love photographers, so great. But there's been the tactic where guy photographers will be like, let me just shoot some pictures of you, and it's turned out all bad for some. I've heard many stories like that. Anyway, that's another story for another day.
Pick up photography. Maybe I
What?
said
You
maybe
gotta pick, maybe you should pick up a photographer.
I'm
Oh
doing
God.
it all wrong.
It'd be great in Vermont. Lots of beautiful trees. Love that.
Seriously. Uh, so yeah, so I was just like, oh yeah, like I knew this was I'd always felt not always, let me stop lying. I felt strongly recently about identifying ways that communities are more similar than what we think. Right. I think we all have
Mhm.
our own unique differences, right? But I think when we, especially again, specifically in the country,
Yeah.
we've got really similar stories and like how we got to the country or like
Yeah.
how we are treated. I'm like, oh, see, there's something we can connect on.
Hmm.
And I think those things are important to recognize in order to like um, stop division.
Yeah.
I think it's
I
so
agree.
for us to divide and say, oh no, but this is their problem or this is your problem. It's like,
Hmm.
let's take a pause.
Yeah.
We really look at it. If you look at, communities of color and one that I was more interested in, I had I would say minimal interaction with Asian folks growing up. I mean,
Hmm.
and I didn't necessarily see a ton of and I want to let me be clear. I recognize Asian is a huge umbrella,
Yeah, of course. Hmm.
right? um so I just noted like when I like visually, I was like, huh, like I see white and black people hanging out together. I see like some Latin and black people hanging out. I don't see like a ton of black and Asian people. And I was thinking about people
Hmm.
who are in relationships or like mixed children.
Hmm.
I was like, oh, I don't really see it that much. I wonder, huh? Like it was nothing. I was like, it's like I'm going to figure this out if this is the only thing I'm going to do. But it was in the
Yeah.
my mind, and I was like, huh, okay. And it was something like I kind of wanted to like seek out. You know, what
Yeah.
I'm saying? Like I was like, huh, I kind of want to seek out kind of like what people's experiences were, and is that my own experience? Is that my own experience?
Hmm.
Is that something that I just noticed, or do other people notice it? Is it?
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm just curious about it. So that's really kind of it came up in school, and I was like, hey, what? This is a great time to like have access to someone who's also interested in doing the same kind of work,
Yeah.
right? Like that is also like my hope is to support um, all people, and specifically those who may look a little bit more like me.
Hmm.
Um, and my focus really is to get more men of color into mental health practices and
Yeah.
normalizing mental health, just because I think I had that kind of unique experience, and
Hmm.
I feel like I owe it. And sometimes it takes somebody who is a little bit more relatable
Yeah, for
to
sure.
to bring you in. So nonetheless, yeah, I kept like I kind of when she was like, yeah, no, I'm not ready for that yet. I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna put it on the back burner. And I also want to be careful. I also wanted to be really careful about like how I was approaching people.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
hey, you're Asian, right? Okay,
Yeah. That spokesperson
you know what
tokenness is
I'm
good.
saying? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to tiptoe here. If like if you knew me, then you know that that's not what kind of person I am.
Totally. Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? But but I also want to be considerate
Yeah.
of other folks. So yeah, when he told me about you and told me about the Asian Mental Health Project, I was like, well, I think maybe this is it. I think
Aw, yay.
this could be it. And I had a chance to look at um, uh, some of the content, and
Mm-hmm.
I really, I'm gonna say it again. You're doing phenomenal work.
Oh, thank
Like
you.
I said before that it was, you know, Asian is an umbrella, but I think you've done a really great job of looking at like the complexity and the diversity within
Mm-hmm.
culture, within that Asian umbrella. And you've picked really great
Yeah.
guests. You've tackled um, pretty much A through Z, uh,
Oh,
some of the like the issues, you know what I mean?
yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's really important, I like exploring the diversity within this within the group, right?
Yeah.
And that's not something that I think is normal to like
Mm-hmm.
explore that and openly explore it. So I wanted to commend you first, like, but
Oh,
yeah, like,
yeah. I appreciate that. Also, because yeah, I feel like that's something I'm self-conscious of, especially yeah, I know my place in privilege as like a lighter skinned East Asian woman, and I can only contribute my experience and my piece of the puzzle. And I know that's not representative of all Asian experiences. So that's something we're definitely like I'm personally trying to you know um represent as much as I can, but also find voices and different stories and resources for people all throughout the Asian sort of diaspora.
mhm,
However, yeah, I also totally recognize that there's no way we're going to cover every single piece of the puzzle. We're just part of the conversation, not the whole thing, and that's something I tell myself a lot. So I really appreciate you noticing. That's really great. Yay.
yeah, it's I think it's really clear that that's the direction that you wanted to go in.
Yeah.
So let's start with the road to starting Asian mental health. Where were
Oh
you?
yeah.
Was it an aha moment? Was a string of aha moments? Was it a
Yeah.
string of like maybe your own struggles?
Mm-hmm.
All,
All three, all of the above. I picked D, all of the above. Oh yeah, okay. How this got started? Well, I like. Let me put it in a series of three aha moments. I like that a lot. The first aha moment was I was super angry. Is always how it starts. Actually, you know what? I'll back up a little bit.
okay.
So in college, I'll share from my personal experiences as to why mental health became so important to me. So in college, I think entering college, I was already struggling with anxiety and depression, just didn't know it, and a little bit of disordered eating as well. Didn't know it, didn't know to face it. Was really like, I'm gonna put a smile on my face, I'm gonna excel in X, Y, and Z, and then everything's gonna be fine as long as I reach these goals.
Mm.
Whew, boy, does that fester and bubble up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So what had happened? Oh yeah. So I went through a little bit of a traumatic incident. A little bit of if I'm being super honest here, and you could probably issue a trigger warning. That went through a bit of sexual violence. And so because of that, I still didn't recognize what had happened to me. Until I went to like get a regular checkup with a gynecologist, and I like made a joke about what had happened. She was like, "Why are you seeing me today?" And I'm like, "Oh well, no, this happened." And she like immediately called the Department of Relationship and Sexual Violence Prevention, and she's like, "You need to go see a counselor. You need to go see a psychiatrist. Let's go put you in this evaluation." So I ended up that semester, it was such a whirlwind. I ended up seeing, one-on-one therapist, a psychiatrist, as well as group therapy. So all of a sudden, having not addressed mental health at all of a sudden I was doing 3 sessions of different things at once. And it just like really hit me in the freaking face. I was like, this is wild. But I'm really grateful that did happen, because, it set me on my mental health journey, helped me realize, things about anxiety, PTSD, depression that I've experienced, and, ultimately helped me better manage it to this day. And I'm so grateful that it happened. However, my aha moment from that point was like, oh shit, like if I hadn't actually gone through all those like traumatic experiences and really been hit in the face with all this stuff, I wouldn't have acknowledged my mental health for who knows when, like it was really, it was like a medical necessity for me. And then that's when I started my mental health journey. And a lot of people don't have even that privilege of, being able to have opened up to my gynecologist to do all, so like if I was thinking like, if I didn't have that exact set of experiences, I don't know where I'd be. I don't know what I'd do at this point. So yeah, so that got me thinking. A couple months of, that taking medication, I graduate college. I've graduated college. I'm thinking back and reflecting on this experience. This took me to my second aha moment, where I'm like reflecting on how had I had, resources that told me what consent was, or what, these different things were, what anxiety and depression were, had I known these things, at an earlier age, in high school even, or younger, maybe a lot of what I had gone through in college could have been better managed and mitigated. Also, a lot of the trauma that I went through had to do with my identity and race and stuff like that. So like, I was like, oh man, I'm really, where's the care for, Asian folks, Asian women, like people like myself, So I actually went and looked up my high school and Googled different resources for Asian youth, specifically after college, and found that there really wasn't too much out there. Since then, there have been so many really, really great, accounts and sites and resources that have popped up. But, I think when did I graduate? 2018. And when I looked it up then, there was really nothing. So I was like, okay, well, I have a background in public relations and communications. That's my, work. That's all about synthesizing information and making it more digestible and relatable to a certain audience. So what if I take my skill set in there, partner with, mental health professionals, or try to find a way to normalize and bring more conversation about mental health to the Pan-Asian community, or to the Pan-Asian public. So then after that, I went, and I was not sure if anyone would resonate with this, but the funny thing about like growing up, I grew up in a predominantly Asian community, and yet loneliness is something I felt all the time. I didn't feel like I accepted, as an Asian American woman, I feel like you battle a lot with your identities. You kind of hyphenate or separate the Asian and the American part. I think my parents were so strung up on making me seem more American to like fit in better, that I repressed a lot of my Asianness and didn't want to accept a lot of it. So anyway, all that's to say, even though I grew up in this predominantly Asian space, I never really felt accepted or felt a sense of belonging. And we can go in through a lot of the systemic backgrounds of that. But all that's to say is that when I came up with the idea for this project, I was like, oh shit, like who the fuck's gonna want to do this with me? I don't know. So then I posted on Instagram like a little blurb. It's still on my Instagram. It's hilarious. But it was like, hello, is anybody interested in working on this project with me? Asian American mental health is, want to talk about that. Let's destigmatize, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And then I got a really overwhelming response. And so that was like, personally, it made me feel less alone, but also I was like, oh shit, like this is a real need. People need to do this. So yeah. So then with that, I think I interviewed like 60 people. I was just curious. Like I wanted to know what people's experiences were. And as you were saying earlier, of course, everybody has nuanced individual experiences, but there were key themes. Like people were experiencing self-loathing, like low self-esteem throughout the course of their life. People pleasing, stuff like that. They were like, everybody had vastly different experiences and upbringings, but there were really similar like emotional themes that we could all find common ground on, which I felt was really interesting. So from that, fast forward, using that sort of data, developing content, then eventually running events that were educational. And then here we are today, couple years later. Now we sort of have three pillars. Community events is one of them, all with the mission to like educate and empower Pan-Asian communities in seeking mental health care. That's my practice mission statement. Yeah, but so we have community events, we have multimedia resources. So Instagram, 2020 was like the year of the infographic. I feel like so lots of infographics there. And then hopefully now we're starting nonprofit status. So we want to establish a community fund deeply rooted in like mutual aid foundations. We want the fund to not just be directly for mental health, but for any sort of like, I fully believe that mental health has to do with food security, housing security, anything you really need. So we want that fund to be, it's just sort of a need-based wellness fund that, you could use to take care of what you need to take care of. So working on that currently, and that's Asian Mental Health Project in a nutshell. Woohoo!
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. That was a lot. Thanks for listening.
Yeah. So I want to backtrack. You said you pretty much backflipped into therapy, right?
I did.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
And was that something that was encouraged, or was that kind of your approach? Like, I'm gonna go in like all the way.
Yeah, it was not encouraged. I hid it from my family, my friends for pretty much the duration of it in college. But it was encouraged by my healthcare provider, who was like, you need to do these three things. And I was like, okay. So I did hide it for until this last year, actually. Yeah.
Wow. And what was people's kind of reaction? Yeah, what were people's reaction to like you coming out about this?
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, I think my closest friends were really supportive, which is great. But there are also people that kind of laughed about it. They're like, I think it's felt so taboo that people would make fun of the concept of like going to therapy for X, Y, and Z. It's rooted in stigma and stuff like that. But there were mixed reactions, I would say. For the most part, like my friends are so amazing and so supportive and like, do what you need to do. I don't understand this, but go forth. And the most rewarding part is people who I've opened up about it, and then afterwards they would also seek their own, like maybe years after they've sought their own mental health care. But it was interestingly mixed reactions in the beginning. I had some friends who were, making fun of me, very hurtful, but we're good now. for like the trauma and stuff like that. But mainly I don't fault them for it. It's just like, when it's not talked about in our community, how do you react to it when it happens? Some people's coping mechanism is humor. So yeah, there's that. But then telling my family about it, well, I will say I've only told my mom about everything that happened, and I didn't even tell her everything that happened. I told my mom, actually, because of COVID, I stayed at my mom's place, and then we had a series of explosive heart to hearts, and then I opened up about all the things that are happening. And I've gotten through some, our family has had some mental health issues before, so this just like further deepened the conversation between me and my mom. So it went better than I thought it would be, but it's still not 100% accepted in my family, even though like I feel like sometimes I have to justify me seeking therapy because I'm doing this project, or because I'm making something out of it.
Yeah.
That way it's okay to do therapy because it's like research. And that's somehow, maybe that's a problem, but that's how I'm framing it so that my parents would better understand.
What do you think it is? Because I think this is like this is one of those things where it crosses lines, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm still having like conversations with my family around not only mental health, me as a mental health provider. Like
Yeah.
that is still very foreign. Like when I
Yeah.
told you like, oh yeah, I'm a mental health provider at a college.
Mm-hmm.
That's I like people ask me 3-4 times, like, so what do you do again at the
Yeah.
college? I think I told you. And similar, you mentioned anger, right? Like some
Yeah.
of the things that come up, like, like my similar stories. Like I was open about going into therapy a few years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's just like it is like a foreign concept, and it really, I think it hits I think it hits a sensitive spot,
Mm-hmm.
especially with maybe like parents.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
They're like, so are you like that? Maybe they take maybe it hits something inside of them where they're like, oh wow, like you're going through something. Then they maybe reflect on like what they're going
Mm-hmm.
through. Um, yeah, well, that's fascinating. I'm really happy to hear that you and your mother had, like, in the best way possible, had some explosive heart to hearts.
Yeah.
um, and so yeah, what was, I don't know, what are your parents, or specifically your mom, since you were having heart to hearts, what's her understanding of like therapy?
Yeah. I don't know if she has the well, her understanding of therapy is that it's an unbiased third person perspective
Okay.
who's able to help you sort out your emotions. Like way I explained it to her and the way she sort of understood it's like I actually she compared it. So she's recently gone to church, like
Okay.
religious woman.
Okay.
And the way we talk about it, she talks about it like when you go and oh, I'm gonna botch it. I'm not when you go and repent for your sins. Is that correct? Oh
Confession,
God.
like
Yes,
confession,
a
yeah.
confession, something like that, or like you go and you go to church and that's a sort of way to cleanse.
Yeah.
Oh God, I'm so botching it. Ah,
You
I'm so sorry. No disrespect. Yes, yes. When you're able to open up to God, is what you said. Sorry, that's probably better. Open up to God about everything that's going on, and He approaches you with no judgment. That's sort of how I approach therapy, and like that conversation is so important, and they are very similar. Like having a place of like refuge and a place of um, being able to open up with no judgment.
Sure.
That's how I relate to my mom and explain to her what therapy is.
Yeah.
So that's been a very helpful like communication tool, like sort of I think meeting in the middle of what we both can understand
Yeah.
has helped a lot. But yeah, definitely, having talks about religion, spirituality, um, and being open and vulnerable.
Yeah.
I think that's helped the discussion a lot. But I think my mom's understanding of with to your point earlier, it's hard for I think a parent to talk about their kids going to therapy because I think my mom thinks she failed in certain ways,
Yep.
you know, and that's painful because I would like want to be like, okay, maybe there were some things that could have been done differently. But she did the best she could with what she had, and she was an immigrant Asian woman trying to make it as a freaking piano teacher. Like she had to hustle a lot, and there were a lot of things that I don't think she could have actually. I take that back. I don't think she could have necessarily done differently, and I don't want to fault her for the reason why I'm going to therapy at all. But I think it's hard for her to like wrap her head around that, as a parent, your child, is like your responsibility. So, she's apologized to me for like X, Y, and Z things that I was like, oh, you don't have to apologize to me for that. But she's been reflective of it because I've been telling her to go to therapy. But yeah, it's interesting.
Would she ever consider going to therapy? Did you ever have that conversation with her?
I have not explicitly asked it. I thought I was like, you and dad, maybe like a couple, it could be fun, like an activity. And she's like, no, we'll just go to church. And I'm like, good enough. That's
Yeah, yeah,
fine.
absolutely. Yeah, I know a couple folks. I've actually had them on the podcast, and
Hmm.
they're in therapy with their mothers. Uh,
Yeah.
and I would love to go to therapy with my family. I
Oh,
think
yeah.
it's so damn helpful. Uh,
Hmm.
I also recognize that the way I'm thinking about therapy is not
Hmm.
actually how it would go. Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, okay, cool. All right, you do like, all right, therapist, go.
Yeah.
And then it's just like, I'm thinking like my mom's so quiet. My mom,
Oh, mama.
like, she's not talking at all. Like, I
Hmm.
guarantee you, it does not matter. Like, she's not talking. So that I'm like, okay, well,
Hmm.
that's not gonna help here.
Hmm.
I was like, my dad was like, he probably would dominate the conversation.
Yeah. Hmm.
I'm
My
like,
dad
okay,
too.
Yep. And I'm like, well, there goes that. And I'm not sure what that dynamic would be between like I'm not sure what the dynamic would be like talking to the therapist. Like I could
Yeah.
imagine my dad be like, wait, hold on. No, 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 no. This is how it kind of should go. Yeah, man, I don't think so. And I'm really glad you brought up having compassion for your mom and
Hmm.
like, hey, I'm not in therapy because you failed as a mother.
Hmm.
Yes, there are things that you would like you wish would have been different or you want to explore now because yeah, you're just curious about like why you are the way you are.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that's a constant practice, right? You
Yeah.
have to, like, practice that because I think it's really easy to fall into like, fuck, like why did you do like you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, oh, like this, I did not like that. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely been there too.
of course, of course.
Yeah.
Um, did you was that part of was that part of your journey into therapy and more acceptance of like, maybe how you were raised?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I was very particular about finding like an Asian therapist who would like understand these family dynamics. And my therapist, she's awesome. She's South Asian. Um, and yeah, there's that innate sort of understanding of like, oh, like some things you'll maybe never be able to talk to your family about, but that's okay. And it was about like unpacking like where they came from and how they, how they had me and my sibling as well, and showing that greater compassion for how they grew up. Just I think I used to harbor a lot of resentment, um and it comes and goes sometimes, still, which I think is valid and fair. There are ways that could have been treated differently or better even, but at the same time, when I boil it down to this is what they had to do with the circumstances they had, it help brings me at peace a little bit better, helps me like understand like what I want to do moving forward for myself, how I can better forgive and understand my parents.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that like being able to empathize with where they're coming from definitely has helped my own healing journey as well.
Sure. So when you were like, I kind of like, yeah, I'm really drawn to your story in college,
Hmm.
about more so performance. You mentioned
Hmm.
like achievement and being, I don't know if you used the word achievement, I can't remember, but
Yeah.
you mentioned something about performance and how that was, maybe, um, a cause to the anxiety and feelings of depression and isolation. So,
Yeah.
yeah, could you talk a little bit more about like, what that was like where did that yeah, I mean, these are things that I deal with, not only myself but with students that I see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I feel like being quote unquote high achieving, quote unquote successful, was a way to evaluate whether or not I was okay, wrongfully, I think,
Yes.
which is interesting. I had to unpack this a little bit because there's that stereotype that Asians have really strict parents, they need you to get A's, blah blah blah, stuff like that, which is like true in my household. Yes, to
Yeah,
get A's and
there's
everything.
truth to there are some
Yeah.
stereotypes.
Yeah. But I was like, okay, that has to be deeper than that. And so the way I think about it, the way I've unpacked it is that, that was a way of evaluating whether or not I was okay. Like maybe I'm feeling absolutely horrible and shitty, but at least I got this A on this test.
Yep.
Therefore, I'm doing okay. Therefore, I'm going to push forward. So it's a way to like, it made me repress a lot of things for for that validation, that like check of achievement.
Yep.
And so yeah, that of course that carried on in college, and I was like, as long as I'm doing well in my classes, as long as I also got really into, and this goes into what I was saying about like eating, this sort of like purging. I worked out a lot in college,
Okay.
um and I was like, if I like, as long as I am working out a lot, looking this certain way,
Yep.
and as long as I'm getting A's and whatever the fuck I'm doing okay.
I'm doing all right. Yeah.
No, I know, because at least I could tell my parents, because I was really heavily, a lot of my validation, a lot of my self-worth came from what my parents thought of me. Like, as long as I can tell my parents that I'm doing X, Y, and Z in school, getting involved in these things,
Yeah.
exercising, like whatever, then I'm doing okay.
Yep.
And it was just a way to sort of not simplify, but like it was a way for me to evaluate success, and that became my like North Star. However, again, that repressed a lot of things, and I had to really, I think in therapy during college, I really reframed what success meant to me. Like I don't like to necessarily, success can mean so many things to different people, but I don't have the narrow view of success that I did before. It's more about balance and whether or not I'm taking care of myself on a day-to-day basis and making enough to do so or take care of my situation at hand. That's sort of how I view success these days, rather than like an unattainable, like a moving goalpost.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's sort of my relationship with achievement, and that's something that I'm trying to unpack. Like, why am I this way, and how can I think I'm always going to be a goal-oriented person. That's just how I was raised, but I don't want it to completely consume me, so that when I like reach the goal, I don't want to feel empty at the end. So yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. I just had this conversation with a friend of mine. We were talking about
Mm-hmm.
meditation, and one of the things I've accepted over the last couple years is falling in love with the process, the journey,
Mm-hmm.
of learning information,
Mm-hmm.
and not necessarily the end goal. Like graduation, for whatever reason, hmm, I wasn't really
Mm-hmm.
like, I was reflective, but I wasn't like, and I've never been this kind of like, I've never been the person to like, well, I've never done a backflip in my life, but like, you know what I mean? Like
Next goal to achieve.
backflip or whatever, but yeah, like, but we were having this conversation about like, you have to have that endpoint, and and I'm still kind of working through that conversation. We had a really long
Mm-hmm.
conversation, and there's things that I'm still working through. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the things that she mentioned was, and this is kind of, I don't know, maybe this has something to do with it, but it was
Hit me
talking
with it, yeah.
about her perspective as a woman and having a hard time saying no to things.
Ooh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I would love to hear your perspective on this.
Yes. Yeah. That's interesting. I know we talked earlier about like consent, and that's not just in the way that it's framed now. It's about all things. Like I also have a hard time saying no to just about anything. I'll say yes to freaking I'll be like, yes, I could do it. Like at work,
Yeah.
I say yes to every task. And ooh, yeah, that's a big one to unpack. I think for me, a lot of it stemmed from, well, one, we actually talked about this in one of our like Asian mental health project sessions, and it like gave me another aha moment. Like trauma,
Mhm.
people pleasing as a trauma response,
Mhm.
and not to say it's like, or like just the way I was sort of raised is that, one, you want to say yes to opportunities that you have, no matter what the opportunity, be grateful, take every opportunity.
Okay.
Two, you want to make sure that you're pleasant as a woman, you
Mhm.
know, make you're smiling at everybody, make sure you're, I wouldn't say the word submissive, but that's sort of the stereotype that we have. A lot of people have for women, particularly Asian women. Make sure that you're serviceable, like you're serving your father or your elders or your brother, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that like drilled in a very like yes mentality for myself. So not saying no, and you never want to be the person to like push any buttons, refuse to say no. That really wasn't an option in my household for me. I had to always go with what my dad said. The gender roles were really really prevalent in my household. Therefore, I feel like I had to say yes a lot, and that trickles into now where I feel like I have to people please a lot, so therefore I say yes to a lot of things that I'm asked. That's something I'm definitely working on actively. But yeah, I see that a lot with women, particularly the Asian women that I talk to. A lot of people pleasing because of sort of the trauma response there. And there's a little bit of what is it? The four, there's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, and fawn is the people pleasing one. Those are like the four responses to trauma or something happening. Obviously there's fight or flight. Freeze is like you don't know, you don't do anything, and then fawn is that you do everything you can to alleviate the situation, especially in a more volatile household. That
Yep.
might be a thing. So I feel like a lot of times, my parents argued a lot growing up as well. So I became like peacemaker a lot of the time. So that's like saying something to appease my mom, saying something to my dad, so we'd all like calm down and be one happy family. And that's I think contributed to me people pleasing, therefore saying yes a lot. I've unpacked this.
That, so I wasn't listening. I wasn't preparing. I wasn't listening to this audiobook to prepare for the interview, but
Mhm.
it just so happened that it worked out.
I
So
love it.
are you familiar with the show Fresh Off the Boat?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I'm pretty sure. I don't know. I need to go back. So the creator, Eddie Huang,
Mm-hmm.
uh, did an audio memoir.
He did. I have to listen to it.
It's fucking legit. Legit.
Yeah.
It was so crazy to hear. So he also had a show on Vice at one point called Huang's World. And turns out that my close friend of mine, from actually the first person who I ever had on a podcast, was one of the producers.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, and he had always spoke really highly about Eddie. Look at me
Mhm.
dropping first names like I know him.
Anyway.
He um and I was like, oh, like I watched a couple episodes of Fresh Off the Boat, and I was like, oh, dude, I kind of like this show. This is
Mm-hmm.
interesting. Like, and it's so like new. I'm like, yo, no one not
Mm-hmm.
to my knowledge, I haven't had exposure to like an Asian family show.
Mm-hmm.
And not that I'm super into TV, but I was like, this is important. Like, imagery is important,
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
really important. And so I have been, hmm, I have been very reflective as I have my rural lifestyle in Vermont.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of time to read and and do just about anything you want to do
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't require a ton of like entertainment from the outside.
Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, there's just not a lot of
Trees.
there's a lot of trees, exactly. And so I listened to the audiobook, and it was like the audiobook was like 7 hours, but I
Mm-hmm.
finished it in 2 days. And not that I was trying to like, oh, I gotta go finish it, but
Mm-hmm.
I was thoroughly engaged in his story. And
Mm-hmm.
he talks about moving from he talks about moving from the DC area down to Orlando, Florida, and that's kind of where he, grows up and struggling with identity and his connection to hip hop, his connection to food early on.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about the family structure. I like it because he goes back and forth. He does a I don't remember the term he uses, but he goes back and forth in Chinese and English. But it's like
Mm-hmm.
perfect. I was like, oh damn, cool. Like I'm getting a little like education, but
Yeah.
it's so smooth, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, damn, that's a skill set.
Yeah.
That's a skill set. And his accent is like he moved to New York later on in life, and you can hear that he like picked up the New York accent.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was like, you're a pretty cool dude. Like he sounds like a cool guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like vocally, I'm like, oh yeah, you got like a cool voice to do um an audiobook. But he was talking about his brother being that. Like he has two other brothers, and he talked about his growing up in a really kind of like volatile house and like a
Mm-hmm.
where his parents argued a lot
Mm-hmm.
um and like he got his ass whooped all the time.
Yeah.
He got fucked up. And he talks about, his frustration with that. And but he
Mm-hmm.
did talk about his brother being like the like the I don't know, like the not people pleaser.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if his brother was a people pleaser or he just knew how to like get in the middle of some of these arguments between everyone.
Yeah.
He was that person that was able to like say, "Oh wait, hold on, like
Mm-hmm.
you don't need this." And again, early exposure, like
Mm-hmm.
young exposure for me, because I'm like, "Oh, this sounds very much like a household that I grew up in."
Yeah.
Um, I didn't have any siblings in the house when all this stuff was going on, but it was so
Mm-hmm.
he was talking about his identity in private schools, his
Mm-hmm.
his struggles, his real claim to being Taiwanese was until he had to like go, like had
Yeah.
I didn't know it. This dude had a felony in college. He
Oh, I didn't know that either. Holy crap.
had to like he had to go like his he had a like he was charged with a felony. He has a really interesting fucking story.
Yeah, I gotta listen to this audiobook. This is wild.
Yeah, he I had no clue. Like he went to law school, but like his struggles with education, and he's always been extremely smart. And I didn't know,
Mm-hmm.
like, I didn't know anything about this, which
Mm-hmm.
makes it even cooler to like learn about this guy. And he just gives a very, very transparent, kind of like seamless story of
Mm-hmm.
growing up in Orlando in this complex Asian household.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, word, like this is what I like. Yeah, this is what I want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And he really talks about this being like the American story.
Yeah.
It is about being, it is about being Chinese and
Yeah.
uh, but it very much is about being like his struggles with being identifying as an American.
Mm-hmm.
So um yeah, when you said that, like people please like someone getting in the middle of a conversation, that's what rang out and
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, I definitely resonate with that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, where do you see where do you see where do you see this going now that you're on the way to becoming a nonprofit? It's gonna
Mm-hmm.
very short amount of time.
Is it? That's nice of you to say.
Hey, come on, I'm manifesting this for you. I'm
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, actually, no, I accept. I'll take it. I'll take it. That's great.
like two. This has happened. I mean, this has happened quickly.
It has happened quickly. There's been a lot that's happened in the last year. Mm-hmm.
So what is this? Okay, so this is interesting. You throw this blurb out on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
You get a shit ton of feedback. People are like, "Yeah, what's up? I'm down. Let's do."
Yeah.
You you start um yeah, yeah, you pretty much hit the ground running, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you've brought in a ton of people. I was looking, you have like a board.
We do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you know to like go through these steps?
Mm-hmm.
Like if someone's watching, like, okay, I want to start an organization.
Mm-hmm.
I want to do okay, what were your steps to like where you are now? Once you just
Yeah.
okay, yeah, I got the idea.
Yeah.
How did you identify who you wanted to work with?
Yeah. That's a really good question. Yeah. So my core team that I work with consists of people that I either found on the internet
Okay.
or or I'm working with one of my head of content is like a childhood friend of mine, which is really, really great. But I think posting that online garnered like a group of people who'd be like, hey, I would love to work on this with you. Let's do it. That sort of fizzled in and out a little bit as like the organization like ebbed and flowed. But as it stands now, yeah. So we have a core, board of directors. We have like a clinical advisory board that we're building. Of one our focus for that is to bring in real, licensed assistants with our content and events and stuff like that. And then we have our awesome team of everyone's a volunteer, but we have outreach volunteers, stuff like that. And so the way it all came to be, it is wild to think that just a little over a year ago, it was sort of me and a couple of people like doing one-off projects and stuff like that. But that's really evolved. I think I really wanted to stay focused on what I wanted out of this project.
Yeah.
And that was to throw the events, to create resource and content, and then eventually to do the fund. And in order to get to the fund, I knew I had to start a nonprofit. In order to start a nonprofit, I knew I needed a core team. So
Yep.
therefore, then after doing that, after realizing, these core steps, that's when I started, helping to build the team and, connecting with people online to see who would be part of it. But yeah, all of our, I really used Instagram a lot as a tool, which is really interesting. So many DMs I slid into, so many things.
I mean, this is like nuance, right? Like this is how people
Yeah,
legit get shit started.
yeah, yeah.
Millions of people.
I know. Yeah, the DM is, don't underestimate the power of the Instagram DM.
Yeah, I'm trying so hard. I'm fighting a whole lot. Like there's times where I'm like, oh man, I should do it. And for professional reasons.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Yeah, no. Yeah. I mean, for professional reasons.
Yeah.
What else? No, just
I
kidding.
think I've done it twice. Well, hey, look, there are people on Instagram who are looking for people to slide into their DMs.
People are looking for love. People are looking for organizations. It's a
All
whole thing.
types, all
All type of things.
um and I think I've done it twice, and it's been for the podcast. I think I tried to get there was a story out a few years ago. Actually, I don't even know how long ago it was. COVID fucked all of my timing.
Yeah.
COVID in graduate school fucked all of my
Woo. Yeah.
like, okay, did this happen a few years ago? Like, no, that happened 10 years ago. Like, okay. There was a story, this guy named Michael Sam. He was a openly gay football player. Um, and I wanted to know, I was like, yeah, I want to interview you. Like, would you be on, like, basically send it out like, hey, I think your story is like worth telling. I would love to have you on the podcast. This is kind of some of the work I'm doing with student athletes and mental health. And yeah, and it was so strange to do it. But either way, enough with that. Yeah, that's I think it's important for people to know that is a way to utilize the technology.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Absolutely possible to like build a business using Instagram.
Yeah. I always think about, as much as Instagram and social media fucks people over, it's also, you could use it for the, like, as a tool, which is what we hope to do. And connecting with professionals, facilitators, as well as spreading the word about mental health. So yeah, basically all that to say that I think the team was formed, they're all formed around goals. Like, I'm going to reach this goal post, therefore I need these roles filled. So I'm going to reach out and fill these roles. It was definitely hard to do. I'm stubborn, and I also I feel like I could do it all. Like sometimes, no, not really. Like I feel like I have to do it all. Like if I don't do it all, if I'm not overextending in these ways, that I'm not doing enough. But it's been great, actually, having our volunteers are so freaking awesome, and my board is awesome, the directors are great, and they've really been carrying the team, making all the content, doing all the outreach, stuff like that. It's really like starting to function. Like, it's like my initial purpose for Asian Mental Health Project was for it to be community built, community owned, essentially, so it would sort of run on its own. Like, I had to evaluate, and I still have to evaluate my own role with it. Like, I was like, eventually I want it to be something where it will function by itself, if it still needs to function. I think the goal of a lot of cause-based organizations is to not exist, because
Right.
yeah. So my like overarching goal is to have it be, community owned. So working towards that by building around our pillars, I think that's helped me build a team. But if anyone's looking to do this, yeah, I think specifically starting a nonprofit, logistically, the things to do are to look in your state laws to see what you need for a nonprofit. And then most of the time you'll just need like a board. And it's also good to have a core team of like a secretary, a treasurer, VP and like executive director / president, and then building from there. And yeah,
Yeah.
that's that. Sorry, I went on like 4 tangents.
No, 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 no. I think it's good that like this is. I mean, this is also something that. Uh, this is really great to hear that you kind of just went with it, right? You saw something that you wanted to do, and it wasn't like, oh, I need to wait and like get X, Y, Z. Like you didn't wait to say like, well, I know I need the fund, so before I start the fund, like, or before we can, I can't do anything until I get the fund. It's like, well, like you can start doing things now.
Yeah.
You absolutely can. There are things that you can always work on. That was some of my hesitations with starting a podcast. I was like,
Yeah.
well, what's it gonna be? I remember the second there, I walked in. I did 1 episode. No, I did 2 episodes, and I remember I walked into a dinner at a friend's restaurant, and a guy I had just finished recording a podcast, and the guy was like, "Yeah, what's going on, man?" I was like, "Oh man, I just finished recording a podcast." He's like, "What's the podcast about?" And I was like, "I don't know, just kind of things I'm interested in, and
Yeah.
I don't, I don't know, I don't really know." And like he immediately went into like how to monetize it, and I was like, I'm sitting there trying to like pay attention to him. I kind of felt some, my own shit coming up, like, dude, you don't even know what the podcast is about. How the hell
Yeah.
monetize it? I was like, that's what you heard? Like, and I'm having more reflective thoughts on like how genuine it was to have, a childhood friend since what, 3rd grade on as my first guest.
Yeah, that's so special.
Yeah, or like the next person was someone who I met at in grad school who was working for a program that supported DACA students. I wanted to get their insights on what that experience is like for DACA students in higher ed. So I'm in my feelings about like, man, I feel like I'm having these deep conversations, and there's things coming up that are so great, and you're
Yeah.
about fucking monetize. Like, I don't care about the money. You know what I mean? Like the money, like, I mean, what? I don't. Okay, anyway. But yeah, I think oftentimes there's people who can be really hesitant about making things perfect.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely. Yeah.
Did you ever struggle? Did you struggle with that at all?
Yeah, I was gonna say it's funny that you say it because I talked to my therapist about this, where I struggle with big decision making and also making things. So there's a lot of steps that are going through this nonprofit. I've been definitely procrastinating, but the way I procrastinate is that's what you're saying. I have to make sure I have to feel like I have to be in the correct mental state, in the correct physical state, all these things in order to start the thing. So it was funny. I moved to LA, right? And I was like, I have all these tasks I need to do for nonprofit stuff. But I was like, oh, I'm in LA. It's a fresh start, blank slate. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna go to the gym. I'm gonna, get healthy. I'm gonna do X, Y, Z. I'm gonna furnish my home. Blah, blah, all these things that seem like, quote,
those are all good things.
they are good things. But I was like, I won't name my therapist, but I was like, hey, like, look, I'm doing all these things. I'm going from 0 to 100. And she's like, dial back. You really are going from 0 to 100. What's happening? And then I'm like, oh man, actually I have all these emotions that I have to deal with. There's some grieving that I have to do. And also I have these big nonprofit moves that I have to make that I've been putting off by doing things that are like seemingly productive. And then that took me back to a time when I was like younger, when I was terrible at algebra.
Okay.
Big test I had to study for.
Did
Didn't
we
know how to ask for help. What?
did we just break ground, another opportunity to say that every Asian person is not
Correct.
at every bit of math on earth?
That's right. Yes.
Wait.
I was trash. I was horrible. There we go. Yeah, so I was terrible at this math situation. And so instead of studying for the test, my mom was like, stay in the room, you're gonna study for the test, blah, blah. Instead of doing that, I like painted pictures, I wrote songs, like I did all this other productive shit. So I'd be like, hey, I didn't do the big scary test thing that you wanted me to do, but look, look, I painted 5 pictures and here's a song, mom. So I've been doing that shit since I was like little, and I still do that to today. So and like yeah, I sometimes feel like I can't get started until I have the perfect route to do it, which prevents me from doing things. So I'm working on that actively right now. Yeah.
Well, I think that's part of your creative process. I think that,
Thank you.
I think so. No, I think that absolutely is. I'm similar. If I don't if I don't like I can be deep into some work, but if I don't get behind my, well, you can't see them now, but if I don't get behind the decks and work some shit out and like put some pieces together musically, then
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's just I don't know. Like sometimes it's just not, it's not going to work. So I feel you when you talk about like going to something else creative and using maybe a different part of your,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you do music?
Yeah, yeah. I've been so what's resonating with me when you're talking about 0 to 100. So I've been here a month, and my first weekend here, like I'm a total extrovert. If you right, but um, I do enjoy. I mean, everybody's a little extrovert at one time, a little introverted,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and then it varies, whatever. But I am one of those hit the ground running, similar to you. Like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
cool. Like I got a place to live. Okay, I need to buy a car. Okay, I got a car.
Yeah.
Okay, let me identify like this is not how I'm thinking, but essentially like going down the checklist. All right, how do I build a social network? Okay, how do I, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So my first weekend here, I've known this about myself. There's like a when I'm going, if there's something really new, I get very internal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like I'm just thinking about everything and like I have to get out of my own fucking way or out of my
Yeah.
whatever. So I've come up with a solution and I'm not promoting anybody to go out and go get fucked up or anything, but I need to get a little drunk. Like a little bit. Not like falling out. I'm too damn big to be falling out. But people, if I fall, somebody else is probably going down with
Yeah,
me.
no.
Like so, yeah. No, those days are long over. I tried that. It never worked. There was one. Yeah, it never worked out. We'll leave it at that. I do think, but it was something like where I'm like, oh, I know I need like a couple drinks just to like get out of my head, relax.
Yeah, 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 I get that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like pretty much throw a little bit of inhibition out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm into DJing, and I'm like, yo, I want to DJ like somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I went out into Burlington, Vermont, which is
Oh,
the
I'm so excited.
the
Yeah.
the biggest town in Vermont. It's like the epicenter for like 4 different colleges.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, all right, well, I'm just gonna walk around. Like I'm gonna walk
Mm-hmm.
around and see what music I hear. So long story short, I build like I walk into like 4 different spots. And
Mm-hmm.
chopping it up, I like I hit it off with a DJ. I start chopping it up with him. I'm like, yo, what's the story? He's like, yo, talk to the GM. I start talking to the general manager.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really getting a great vibe from him.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, all right, whatever. So it's the last stop. And like I walk, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm like, I'm on the tail end of like tired and buzzed. So I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, like I'm gonna go in here. And so I walk in and I see a pride flag, and
Mm-hmm.
I was like, huh, okay. Like I like spinning certain genres of electronic music.
Mm-hmm.
My in my experience, that not only historically, when we talk
Yeah.
about electronic music,
Mm-hmm.
started this stuff were gay men.
Mm-hmm.
Long story short, there is a connection between the various gay communities, various queer
Yeah.
communities, and electronic music. So
Mm-hmm.
huh, all right, cool. Let me go see what's up. I walk upstairs. There's nobody in this fucking place. I'm like, yo, I'm like, where the fuck is everybody? And so like I sit down and like I start chopping it up with with this guy.
Mm-hmm.
We start getting into I don't know how the hell we got there, but we you know how the hell we
The
started
best conversation.
right how the hell we started talking about it. But I was like, we started talking about mental health and psychedelics. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, oh yeah, I mean, there's yeah, there's a, like that's the I mean, we're here now, but that's the future. I think that there's a lot of great research being done, and so we go down that
Yeah.
rabbit hole, and then I start talking about um, my own experiences and how they've been really helpful, and
Mm-hmm.
blah 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 blah, and then I'm like, where is everyone? And he's like, yeah, we're like trying to we're going through some transition.
Oh no.
Uh, oh yes to me. I'm like,
Oh yes.
oh, word. Well, it's funny. I DJ and da 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 da. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, like circle back. When I tell people, so I started DJing. I've been DJing there for like 2 weeks.
Oh my god, that's awesome.
Yeah,
Yes.
and so that same, but circling back, that idea of like hitting the ground running, right? Like
Yeah.
I tell
Yeah.
people, they're like I need like friends to kind of check me in some instances, and I'm
Oh
pretty
yeah, same. Mm-hmm.
self-aware, but they're like, You've been there a month, man, and you found a place to DJ." You know what I mean? You're like, "Yeah, you got to like slow down, slow,
Yeah.
slow down,
Yeah.
slow down." So no, I feel you. Um, yeah, like I keep thinking about the work that you have decided to take on aside from your like main gig, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're bringing in, yeah, you're kind of bringing in your talents at your job, right? The talents that you use at your
Mm-hmm.
job into creating your own thing. Well, it is your own thing, but you've brought in so many people, which is so
Yeah.
important,
Mm-hmm.
right? Collaboration is something that I don't know could always be talked about more.
Yeah, I agree. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like it's
Mm-hmm.
important that we don't feel like we have to do this shit on our own.
Yeah.
Fight.
Yeah. Oh, that's a own subject, like the American hero, the champion. Ooh, that's a whole thing. Why is that a thing?
Uh,
Eek.
it's bullshit. Pulling
Yeah.
my own bootstraps and all that other shit. I'm like, oh,
Yep.
God.
Yep.
So yeah, it was a story that worked for some.
Mm-hmm.
At least they thought it did. But
Mm-hmm.
I always like to point out 50%, about 50% of our country is on antidepressants.
Yeah. That's a
So,
lot. Wow. I didn't know that stat.
uh huh, about half of
Mm-hmm.
our country is on antidepressants. So
Sheesh. Yeah.
half of our country feels like they need to take a pill in
Mm-hmm.
order to just live.
Mm-hmm.
So I always ask people, is it working?
Yeah.
Is everything like, and the answer is no.
No. Yeah.
The answer,
Whew. Yeah.
not trying to point all a bunch of fingers. We're all part of this system.
Mm-hmm.
But what we have been doing has been traumatizing the shit out of people,
Mm-hmm.
like really fucking people up. And we have the tools to do better, and we're having great
We do.
conversations,
Mm-hmm.
um, which I would assume is like why you've done this work, right? You see the need for change.
Mm-hmm.
You recognize you have a unique skill set to help.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I'm grateful for people like you who are doing this work, right? Like extremely.
Yeah.
And I know we got to run here, but I wanted to give credit where credit is due. Um,
Thank you. That's so
yeah,
nice.
yeah, keep
Yeah.
doing the work, and um, yeah, I think it's important also, like personally and selfishly, to connect with people who are doing similar work
Yeah, of course. Hmm.
and understand their story, right? Like
Hmm.
that helps me. And I'm not gonna lie, like I know off top, like if I could use you as a resource when like I see students who may be going through similar struggles,
Yeah.
and who are, Asian students are like, yeah, what are the resources? I'm like, well,
Hmm.
I think I might know of one,
Hmm.
in case that, some resources on campus might not be calling to them,
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Hmm.
or people who are exploring Asian students who might be exploring careers in mental health
Hmm. Yeah.
exposure, right? Just like, oh yeah, I'm pretty sure Asian Mental Health Project might be something you want to check out.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that.
You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So yeah, yeah, that's what I got to say. And before we close out, like
Yeah.
I've incorporated. I got to go back and see how many episodes that I like when we started doing this. I can't remember either way. What is something that you love or are in love with?
Ooh. Oh, that's a really good question. Um, I love my community. That's like maybe a cliche little answer, but I love being Asian, love being a woman. And that's I'm loving these parts that I identify with in hopes of working towards loving myself better, just from a self-compassion standpoint. But yeah, I've been rediscovering and re-falling in love with, I think, these parts of my identity and my culture that I hope will only grow, I think, in the future. But I love that question. That's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. I think we. I was thinking about like how to end. I was having trouble ending podcasts,
Hmm.
and I was just doing research on like I was doing research on other podcasts and like how they end their podcasts. And everyone's is different. Some people are like, "All right, man, I'm out. Fuck it," and,
Yeah.
and then other people kind of have like a closing. They have,
Yeah.
and I didn't want it to be too. I struggled with it again. Like, is this cliche or is this? But I'm like,
No, that's
yeah, the
great.
organization is called Love Lab, dummy.
Yeah. It's perfect.
Like,
Yeah.
come on, man. And then, yeah, when do we get to sit and like someone actually ask you, like, what are you in love with? Or
Hmm.
like, we don't. Yeah, that's I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it is common. Maybe
No,
I'm
I've never heard that question before.
well.
So
Great,
I loved it. That was great.
wonderful. All right. Well, thank you again. I really appreciate the time.
Yeah, thank you.
And yeah, we'll in some way, shape, or form, we'll reconnect. Yeah, maybe on one of your webinars, or like I said, connecting people that I come in contact with.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. If you ever want to speak on an Asian mental health project event, hit me up. That sounds great.
I think off the top of my head, some intersectionality is coming up.
Oh, let's go. I love it. Yes.
Intersectionality would
Well,
be
thank you so much. Thank you for all the work that you do, and thanks for having me, share a little bit of my story. I really appreciate the space and all the work that you do, and the love that's growing through your podcast. It's great. Thank you so much.
wonderful. All right. Well, take care of yourself, and we'll talk sooner rather than later.
Sweet. Thanks, Joseph.
Yeah.
All right, bye.